Welcome back to the Anti-Cancer Lab. If you're new here, pull up a chair, you're in good company. This is where I read the cancer studies most people never see and tell you, plainly, what they mean for your plate. No fear, no hype. So grab a coffee and let's look at this together. Today's one almost nobody outside the research world has actually read, which is a strange thing to say about a vegetable you've eaten your whole life. We're going to talk about a number, 450 milligrams, that's been floating around in headlines, and a little green sprout you can grow in a jar on your windowsill for pennies. And by the end, I'm going to tell you, honestly, exactly what that number does and does not mean for the inside of your body. Stay with me, because this is one I genuinely want my own family to hear. Quick note before we start, and on this channel, it matters more than on any other. I'm Dr. Becker. I'm a researcher, not your doctor. I have never had cancer and I have never treated a single patient. Everything I'm about to tell you is me reading published studies and translating them into plain English for general education. None of it is medical advice. None of it replaces your oncologist or your treatment. And no vegetable on earth is a cure. If you are in treatment right now, every single thing I say today goes alongside the people caring for you, never instead of them. You bring what's useful to your medical team and you let them drive. All right, let's get into it. Most papers confirm what we suspected. This one surprised me. I'll be straight with you, because that's the whole deal on this channel. When I sat down with the broccoli sprout research, I expected to be bored. I figured I knew the story. Broccoli is good for you. Eat your vegetables. We've all heard it since we were children at the dinner table. And then I got into the actual chemistry of the sprout. The little 3-day-old seedling, not the big mature head. And I want to be careful how I say this. The sprout is a genuinely different animal from the broccoli on your plate. Not a little different, a lot different. And the human research, what little of it there is, has been sitting quietly in journals for decades, while almost nobody in a busy clinic has had 10 minutes to read it. That part bothered me enough that I had to make this video. So let me start with what's actually happening inside that vegetable. Because once you understand it, everything else makes sense and you'll never steam broccoli the same way again. When you crush, chop, or chew broccoli, you trigger a tiny chemical reaction. Broccoli stores a sort of locked-up precursor compound called glucoraphanin. That's the parked, inactive form, just sitting there in the plant doing nothing. And right next to it, kept separate, the plant keeps an enzyme called myrosinase, which is just a little biological key. The moment you damage the plant, by cutting it or chewing it, the key meets the lock, and the reaction produces the compound everybody's actually interested in. It's called sulforaphane, the compound broccoli makes when you crush it. Glucoraphanin is the locked precursor. Myrosinase is the enzyme key that flips it on. Sulforaphane is the active result. 3 names, 1 chain reaction, and the whole story of this video lives inside it. Now here's the first thing that genuinely surprised me. And it's the reason I keep saying sprout and not broccoli. The little 3-day-old broccoli sprout, the kind that looks like a tangle of pale green threads with 2 tiny leaves, carries many, many times more of that glucoraphanin precursor than the full-grown head you buy at the store. We're not talking about a small bump. A baby sprout is a concentrated little package of the precursor in a way the mature vegetable simply is not. And this is exactly where the famous research comes from. Decades ago, a group of researchers at Johns Hopkins, the names worth knowing are Paul Talalay and Jed Fahey, established the broccoli sprout as this concentrated source and spent years studying what sulforaphane does to cells. That work is real, it's old, it's well documented, and it is genuinely underread by busy doctors. Let me be careful here though, because this is the honest frame and I won't let it slip. Your doctor is not hiding this from you. Your oncologist has 12 minutes with you and a waiting room full of people, and reading the biochemistry of vegetable compounds is just not their job. Nobody's keeping a secret. The research just lives in a quiet corner that a clinic day never reaches. So what does sulforaphane actually do in the lab? Let me put the science on the table, and then I'm going to be very honest about what kind of science it is, because the honesty is the whole point. In laboratory studies, the petri dish and animal kind, sulforaphane does a few things that get researchers excited. The first is that it nudges cancer cells towards something called apoptosis, which is just the medical word for a cell's built-in self-destruct switch. Every healthy cell has this switch. It knows when its time is up and it shuts itself down cleanly. Cancer cells, broadly speaking, are cells that have forgotten how to die, that ignore that off switch and just keep dividing and dividing. In dish studies on prostate, breast, and colon cancer cell lines, sulforaphane pushed those cells back toward pressing that self-destruct button. The second thing it does is it slows proliferation, which just means it slowed down how fast those cells multiply. And the third one is the one I find most interesting as a researcher. Sulforaphane is one of the strongest known natural switches for something called the NRF2 pathway, which is the switch that turns on the cell's own cleanup crew, its internal detox and repair enzymes. Your body has a built-in housekeeping system, and sulforaphane appears to flip it on harder than almost anything else we eat. And here's where I have to plant a flag and slow you all the way down. Because this is the exact spot where a wellness headline lies to you and I refuse to. Every single thing I just told you, the apoptosis, the slowed multiplication, the impressive numbers, that was cells in a dish and animals in a study. That was not a person. Wait. Let me say that more carefully, because the distinction is the entire ballgame on this channel. When a compound makes cancer cells self-destruct in a laboratory dish, that is a real, repeatable, published observation, and it earns the compound a place in the line for more research. It does not even slightly, mean that eating broccoli sprouts makes cancer cells self-destruct inside your living body. The concentrations researchers use in a dish are levels you could never, ever reach by eating a vegetable, no matter how much you ate. And your body absorbs, processes, and breaks these compounds down in a dozen ways a glass dish never has to deal with. So when you see a headline that says, sulforaphane kills cancer, what's true underneath it is that sulforaphane pushed cancer cells toward dying in a dish, at a dose you cannot get from food. Those are very different sentences. One is honest, one sells supplements. Now let me get to that number in the title, the 450 milligrams, because I promise you I tell you exactly what it means. And turning that dramatic number into an honest explanation is the most useful thing I can do for you today. That 450 milligrams is not sulforaphane. I'll say it again because it matters. It is not a dose of the active compound. It's roughly the amount of glucoraphanin, the locked precursor, packed into a typical broccoli sprout extract capsule, which is about what you'd get from a small handful of fresh sprouts. So when a study or a headline says 450 milligrams slowed cancer cell growth, what was actually measured, in the strongest versions, is a change in cells, often cells in a dish or markers in a person, not a tumor shrinking inside somebody, and not anybody living longer. I'm not telling you the number is fake. I'm telling you what it counts. It counts a precursor dose and a change in cells. That's a reason to keep studying. It is not a result you take to the bank, and anybody who hands you that number as proof that a capsule fights your cancer is skating way past what the data says. So is there any human evidence at all? Yes, a little, and I'll be honest about exactly how much, because I get asked to show my homework, and you're right to ask. There have been small, early human trials, and almost all of them looked at biomarkers, which are signposts in the body, not survival and not tumor shrinking. The one people point to most often was a randomized trial in men whose PSA, their prostate marker, was rising again after prostate surgery. Researchers gave them broccoli sprout extract and watched something called the PSA doubling time, basically how fast that number was climbing. And there was a signal, a hint that the climb slowed a little. Now I have to be careful, the way I always am. That was a small study. It measured a marker moving, not men living longer. A signal like that is a reason to run a bigger trial. It is not a reason to throw out your treatment or to believe a capsule is doing the heavy lifting. There have also been broccoli sprout extract trials looking at detox biomarkers, measuring whether the body clears certain pollutants faster. Again, real, again, early. Again, biomarkers and not survival. So the honest human picture is this: small, early, mostly biomarkers, promising enough that serious people keep studying it, humble enough that I won't oversell you a word of it. Alright, enough biology. Let me put this firmly on the plate, because mechanism with no plate action is just trivia, and I don't do trivia here. And the good news is that the practical side of this one is some of my favorite advice to give, because it's nearly free and it actually works. Here's the first and biggest one, and it's the one I'd start with myself. Broccoli sprouts have many times more of that precursor than the mature head, and you do not need to buy a thing or pay a supplement company. You can grow them yourself, in a jar, on your kitchen windowsill, for pennies. You buy a small packet of broccoli sprouting seeds once, a few dollars, and it lasts you ages. You put a spoonful in a clean, wide-mouthed jar, cover the top with a bit of mesh or cheesecloth held with a rubber band, rinse and drain them twice a day, and in about 3 to 5 days you've got a jar full of fresh sprouts. That's it. No soil, no sunlight needed, no green thumb. I'll tell you what I'd actually put on my own plate. A small handful of those fresh sprouts, tossed onto a sandwich, into a salad, or piled on top of scrambled eggs, a few times a week. They've got a fresh, peppery, almost radish-like bite to them. And that peppery bite, that little nip at the back of your tongue, that's the chemistry talking. That bite is the sulforaphane forming. For pennies a serving, you've got the most concentrated form of this compound that exists in food. Now that's one. Here's the next. And it's about how you cook the regular broccoli you've probably already got in your fridge. Because most people destroy the very thing they're eating it for. Remember that enzyme, myrosinase, the little key that flips the precursor into the active compound? That key is fragile. It's a protein, and heat wrecks it. So if you do what a lot of us were raised to do, and boil broccoli into a sad gray mush, you have very likely cooked the enzyme to death, and without the key, far less of that sulforaphane ever forms. You ate the vegetable and threw away half the point. So here's the realistic fix, and it costs you nothing but a glance at the clock. Don't boil broccoli to death. Steam it lightly, about 3 to 4 minutes, just until it's bright green and still has a little snap to it. Light steaming preserves much more of that enzyme than a hard boil does. And if you're eating it for this reason, let the chopped broccoli sit on the cutting board for a few minutes before it goes anywhere near heat. Because that resting time lets the key and the lock meet and start the reaction before the heat arrives. Bright green, a little crunch, a short rest after chopping. That's the difference between eating broccoli and eating broccoli for the compound. Let me build on that, because here's the trick that almost nobody tells you, and it's my favorite thing in this whole video. What if you've already overcooked it? What if you love your broccoli soft, or you only ever buy the frozen bags, where the blanching process before freezing has usually already knocked out most of that enzyme? Are you out of luck? No. And this is genuinely clever and completely free. The myrosinase enzyme, that key, doesn't only live in broccoli. It lives in other plants in the same family, so you can borrow it. Here's the move. After you've cooked your broccoli, sprinkle on a little mustard powder, just ordinary ground mustard from the spice aisle, or ground mustard seed. Mustard is loaded with active myrosinase. That borrowed enzyme walks in and does the job your cooked broccoli's own enzyme can no longer do, flipping the leftover precursor into active sulforaphane right there on your plate. This is well documented, it's real, and it costs about a nickel. A quarter teaspoon of mustard powder stirred into cooked or frozen broccoli, or honestly any cruciferous vegetable, restores a lot of what the heat took. And if you don't have mustard, the same family of plants works. Fresh radish on top, a little grated horseradish, a sprinkle of arugula, all of them bring their own myrosinase to the party. I keep a little jar of plain ground mustard right by the stove for exactly this, and a pinch goes over the broccoli every single time. The mustard trick, remember it. It turns sad frozen broccoli back into something worth eating. And there's a fourth, even simpler one, for the days you can't be bothered with any of that. Just eat some of it raw and chew it well. When you chew raw broccoli florets thoroughly, your own teeth do the crushing, the lock and key meet. The enzyme's still alive because nothing's been heated, and the sulforaphane forms right there in your mouth. A few raw florets dipped in a little hummus as a snack, well chewed, is about as low effort as this gets. So you've got 4 cheap, doable ways to get this compound. Grow sprouts in a jar. Steam regular broccoli light, not to death. Sprinkle mustard powder on the cooked or frozen kind to restore the enzyme. Or just chew the raw florets well. The sprouts and the mustard trick are the two I'd reach for first. Let me give you one more honest layer on that mustard trick, because there's a small catch worth knowing. The borrowed enzyme works best when the food has cooled down a touch. Remember, the enzyme is fragile, it's a protein, and heat is what knocked out the broccoli's own enzyme in the first place. So if you sprinkle mustard onto food that's still screaming hot, you can wound the borrowed enzyme the same way you wounded the original. The fix costs you nothing. Let the broccoli sit a minute or two off the heat until it's warm rather than scalding, then stir in the pinch of mustard and let it sit another couple of minutes before you eat. That little rest is when the key meets the lock. I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, this is just another food fad. Somebody read one paper and now everybody's sprinkling mustard on things. Fair, I'd think it too. But this one isn't a fat blogger's invention. It's basic plant enzyme chemistry that food scientists have measured directly. And the beauty of it is you risk nothing by trying it. Worst case, you ate broccoli with a little mustard on it, which is delicious anyway. Best case, you got back a chunk of the compound your cooking would otherwise have thrown out. That's the kind of bet I like. Free to place, harmless if it's wrong. And here's a second plate idea, because variety is what makes a habit stick. And a vegetable you eat the exact same way every day is a vegetable you quit by next month. Sprouts and broccoli are not the only members of this family that carry the precursor. The whole cruciferous family does it, in different amounts. Cabbage, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, arugula, radishes. So you're not stuck with broccoli alone. Rotate them. Sprouts on the eggs a couple of mornings, a little raw shredded cabbage with a sandwich, some lightly steamed Brussels sprouts with that pinch of mustard stirred through after they come off the heat. Arugula is one of my favorites for this, because it's peppery for the very same reason the sprouts are. It's the same chemistry, and it brings its own live enzyme to whatever you toss it into. None of this is exotic. All of them are at any supermarket, and rotating through them means you're getting this compound family several ways across the week, without ever feeling like you're choking down medicine. I want to tell you about somebody, because this one sits close to me. I talk now and then with a fellow, call him Lou, whose brother got a frightening diagnosis a couple of years back. And Lou, the way a lot of us would, went a little frantic trying to do something, anything, for his own health, partly out of love for his brother, and partly out of plain fear that he might be next. And Lou called me up one evening, and he'd found one of those websites selling broccoli sprout extract capsules, the 450-milligram kind, for what worked out to a small fortune a month, and the website was promising him the moon. And he asked me, almost embarrassed, "Doc, is this the thing? Is this what'll keep it away from me?" And I had to be honest with Lou, the way I'm being honest with you. I told him, the compound in that capsule is real, and it's genuinely interesting, and the research is worth respecting. But the website is lying to you about what it'll do. And you can grow the same thing, fresher, for the cost of a packet of seeds. And then I told him the part that I think actually helped him more than the chemistry. I said, "Lou, the most useful thing you can do isn't to find the one magic capsule. It's to put a handful of these sprouts on your eggs a few mornings a week. Eat your broccoli without boiling the life out of it. Sleep, walk, and go get your own screenings on schedule, alongside your doctor." The frantic, expensive version and the calm, cheap version both have you eating the sprout, but only one lets you sleep at night. Lou grows sprouts in a jar now, and sent me a photo of it on his windowsill. And he told me the jar makes him feel like he's doing something steady and real for his brother and for himself, instead of something panicked and broke. That, to me, is the whole thing. Not the chemistry, the jar on the windowsill, and a man who stopped being afraid every morning. And let me be straight with you, because we've reached the place where I have to be. None of this is a cure. Broccoli sprouts do not kill cancer in your living body the way a headline says, and a 450-milligram capsule does not undo a tumor. If you ever see a video or a bottle promising you that, close the tab and keep your wallet shut, because that person is selling something and it is not the truth. Here is the honest version, the one I'd stake my name on. What we have is genuinely strong laboratory chemistry, sulforaphane pushing cancer cells toward their self-destruct switch and switching on the body's own cleanup crew, in dishes and in animals, at doses you cannot reach from food. And what we have in people is small, early, and mostly about biomarkers. A hint here, a signal there, in trials too small to promise you anything. That's it. That's the whole honest claim. It shifts the odds a little, maybe, over years, and it costs you almost nothing to find out. And it is one of the most studied, safest, most pleasant vegetables you could possibly add to your week. I won't dress it up bigger than that, because the day I start overselling you is the day you should stop trusting me. Food isn't a cure, but it's the one lever you hold 3 times a day. So here's your one thing this week, and it's genuinely just one thing, and it's nearly free. On your next shop, or just order them, buy one small packet of broccoli sprouting seeds. A few dollars last you ages. Then this week, get a clean jar, put a spoonful of seeds in, cover the top with a bit of cloth and a rubber band, and rinse and drain them twice a day. In 3 to 5 days, you'll have a jar of fresh sprouts, and you put a small handful on your eggs, your salad, your sandwich. That's the whole assignment. If sprouting feels like too much fuss right now, then your one thing is even simpler. Just buy a little jar of ground mustard powder and sprinkle a pinch on every serving of cooked or frozen broccoli you eat this week. Either one, the seeds or the mustard. Start there, see if you like the peppery bite, and let it quietly become part of your life. That's the step I'd start with myself, and it's the step I actually took. Let me leave you with this, and I mean it calmly, not as a slogan. You hold one lever every single day, 3 times a day, and it's your plate. That is not nothing. You cannot control your genes, you cannot control everything that happens inside your body, and I would never stand here and tell you a vegetable puts you in charge of cancer, because it doesn't. But you can control what goes on the plate tomorrow, and you can do the small, cheap, pleasant, defensible thing, consistently, for years. That's the whole game. Be the safe driver. Do the doable thing. Bring it to the people caring for you, get your screenings, and let your team do the rest. Your last decades can be good ones, and a jar of green sprouts on the windowsill is a fine place to start that work. Keep it simple, keep it on your plate, and I'll see you right back here. Bring a friend who needs this, and tell me in the comments which one you are starting with this week, the sprout jar or the mustard trick. I read every single one of these.